Welcome to the CalPERS Board of Administration meeting. I'll bring this meeting to order. First order of business is roll call.
Good morning. Priya Mathur.
Good morning.
Rob Fechner.
Good morning.
Margaret Brown.
Good morning.
Matthew Saha for John Chung.
Good morning.
Richard Costigan.
Here.
Richard Gillihan.
Here.
Dana Hollinger.
Here.
Henry Jones.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Ramon Rubicava.
Good morning. Here.
Good morning. Bill Slayton.
Here.
Teresa Taylor.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Lynn Pequin for Betty Yee.
Thank you. We have a full complement. The next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Dana Hollinger to lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, that brings us to the President's report. I want to begin by thanking my colleagues and all of the CalPERS team members who joined us on Monday evening for our annual CalPERS Night with the Kings. This is a tradition that was started by my predecessor, Rob Fechner, a few years ago. In spite of the Kings falling to the Detroit Pistons 106-90, it was a great night as some of our CalPERS team members and their children were on the floor to give a high five to Kings players as they came onto the court. I hope everyone enjoyed the time together. I know I did. And we'll be organizing another outing in the spring to watch our local baseball team, the Sacramento Rivercats, so stay tuned. Regarding the July offsite, I want to let our stakeholders know that we have finalized a location, and we will meet July 16th to the 18th at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Concord, California. Information about the hotel can be found on their website, crownplazaconcord.com. That's Crown with an E. Now, turning now to our meetings this week, I'd like to address our discussions around the future of our work on environmental, social, and governance issues. This is a topic that is key to the long-term sustainability of the fund. As a board member of the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, I have seen firsthand the positive financial impact that ESG investment strategies have had on CalPERS and many prominent institutional investors. The data and strategies outlined by our investment team lay the groundwork for our advocacy with more than 11,000 companies that we invest with. In 2017, we engaged with more than 500 companies on the issue of diversity alone. And research is clear that diversity on corporate boards and within executive teams drives outperformance. We were also successful in our engagements on climate risk reporting with several large oil companies and helped launch the Climate Action 100+ initiative to advance climate reporting with more than 250 other major investors. And that is to ensure that these companies consider climate in their business scenario and risk scenario planning moving forward. I think it's important to note that our commitment to ESG rests on the positive impact it has in driving risk-adjusted returns. Critics of our work will try and tell you otherwise, but you have a commitment from this board that our focus is on strengthening the fund. And finally, I want to close by acknowledging the women who serve on this board and work on the CalPERS team. It's Women's History Month, and CalPERS is proud to have so many women in leadership positions across the organization. In fact, when I was first elected to this board in 2003, I was the sole woman on the board. Today, I'm proud to say that we have 5 women sitting on this board. In recognition of International Women's Day on March 8th, 3 CalPERS women rang the opening and closing bells for gender equality at stock exchanges around the globe. As you can see from the pictures, and I think they're up there, Ann Simpson, our investment director for sustainable investments, was at the New York Stock Exchange. Investment manager Diane Sandoval was in San Francisco, and I was at the London Stock Exchange. You may have also seen a series of social media posts highlighting the women on our board and executive team. It was an honor for us to participate in this day and represent all the women here at CalPERS. And now I'd like to turn it over to our CEO, Marcy Frost, for her report. Marcy.
Thank you, and good morning. President Mather and members of the board. Just to repeat a little bit of what President Mather has already covered this morning, on Monday our agenda for the investment committee was primarily composed around our environmental, social, and governance, or ESG strategies. On Tuesday, we discussed the work that's being done with our health programs and also had a meeting of our governance and performance and comp committee. And then today, we'll give you an update on enterprise performance reporting. And the enterprise performance reporting platform is really to give you an indication of how we are implementing the 5-year strategic plan, whether we're on goal, off goal, on target, off target, as well as getting a bit of a view into the operations and the key performance indicators by which we measure our success on the operational side. I'll also share some feedback that we've been receiving from member and stakeholder groups as we've been out talking to organizations around the state. So let's begin with investments. Again, we had a good discussion about the role that ESG plays in our investment decisions. Our beliefs and policies provide the teams with the framework that they need to engage and ensure that we have strong risk-adjusted returns for the long term. While we also have to recognize the short term due to our current funded status. So we have to have a long-term view, but recognize that we have short-term risks that we always have to be mindful of. Again, at the heart of these policies is our core mission and our primary duty of paying benefits for generations to come. And we strive to get focus with specific actions by which we can measure our performance. I do understand that members and stakeholders, again, as I've been out talking with a number of groups throughout the state, there is some view that ESG is not having a positive impact on returns and that it's taking us away from our core mission, or that we're using our voice more as a large investor to champion social change. But we see our policies as a method and a tool to manage risk as well as opportunity. Because CalPERS is a long-term investor, we want the companies we have an ownership stake in to be successful, and we think our voice is very important in order to have those companies run and align to the value system that we have here at CalPERS. CalPERS is not alone in our ESG practices. We have several organizations that are much aligned with our mission and our views, and we're a part of several investor networks around the globe that share concerns that we would have over the long term. We know that when we work together, a combined voice is stronger than a single voice, so we will continue to the outreach that we have with other organizations who, again, have an alignment of mission and purpose. As we move forward with the proxy season proposals, which we talked about on Monday, we'll also be able to provide more detail about which ESG issues in particular we've been successful with and how that adds to the fund's financial position. And on Tuesday, I just wanted to make a brief remark about the decision that happened in governance on retaining the transcripts. I talked with the team last night, and what we think is the most proactive next step to take, and it was based on some comments that Mr. Miller had provided, as well as comments that came in from public commenters, is that as we put the agendas out on our website and archive those agendas, we will attach the court reporter style transcripts to those agendas. That way, stakeholders are not having to contact CalPERS to get a copy. They can do basically a self-service directly from our website. So we appreciate the input and the ideas from Mr. Miller and our stakeholders. Moving on now to this month's health program agenda. You had the chance to hear the first reading of the health beliefs. As you know, we've had a couple of workshops around the health beliefs, and I think we're really down to fine-tuning the language, and we'll bring those back for a second reading with the, I would say, really minor changes that were discussed yesterday. You also discussed the new value-based insurance design plan for the PERS Select PPO plan. With board approval today, it will be offered for the 2019 open enrollment period later this year. And these are innovative approaches, and in collaboration with other state programs like Healthier You Connections and Let's Get Healthy California, these again are important efforts to foster engagement for members to be more responsible and to really think about their personal health outcomes and what they're trying to achieve. And it's our responsibility that we have programs that would help them to achieve their personal health outcomes, We did hear from the committee, and we will plan to closely monitor the participation over the 2-year pilot and report out on a regular basis on how well we think that pilot is going, or if we're seeing any problems with a pilot, we'll certainly be able to report those out to you. Moving on to a summary of some of the speaking engagements we've been participating in. I want to talk about a couple of those in particular. We did attend the California State Municipal Finance Officers annual meeting, and I was joined by our CFO, Charles, and one of our deputy state actuaries, Fritzy. And we were a keynote group talking about some of the changes that we've been making here at CalPERS and the impacts of those changes on the public employers. In general, I would say that there was much support for the decisions, although they are difficult. There was support for the decisions that are being made. There was understanding around the discount rate and why that had to happen. There was understanding of why the amortization policy had to change, because this is a finance organization. They understood that we have to have sound financial policies at CalPERS. And now the next steps will be really to help the employers understand the impacts to their own budgets on how they forecast and predict the costs moving forward. A ton of compliments coming in for the actuarial team, so I'd like to also recognize the actuaries for their continued work and support of the employers. That came across loud and clear, and one of our actuaries was actually called a rock star while I was there. That was Julian. So the other was I met also with ACCOC's group, or the Orange County chapter of the California Association of Cities, and there I was joined by Senator Morlock, and we were talking about the health of the pension plan, and obviously we have some different views, but also very respectful of one another's opinions. It was a group, again, that's concerned about the sustainability of the fund, but I think was very appreciative, again, of the tough decisions being made at CalPERS as a way to offer that sustained health of the fund in the long run. And this is the second time that I've had the opportunity to meet with this group. I really do appreciate that they continue to reach out and ask us to participate. There are times that we're obviously saying things that are not the most popular things for them to hear, but they are hearing us and continuing to work with us. I also had the pleasure of addressing pension fund leaders for CalPERS, which, as I understand it, is really most of the county funds. And Donna Lum, I think I reported out to you already, is the CalPERS president for this year. And what they asked me to speak about was really leadership and how leadership principles and behaviors lead to better team engagement. And so I was able to talk about some of the work that I brought with me, as well as some work that we've been able to do at CalPERS. I also was able to show the video that our team put together on the 3 leaders who had really taken this call to action about taking one of the 5 principles and putting those within their teams and getting feedback. And that was very well received by this group. And then finally, it was my pleasure to attend the Our Promise breakfast, thank you breakfast, and I did accept the position of chairperson for this next year's campaign. And so I do look forward to working with other state leaders and maybe finding opportunities for this board to get involved to help United Way and the communities and thousands of well-deserved organizations that are operating here in California. And I do have a few ideas on how to get things started. And before I close with the fund's investment performance, I'd like to talk a little bit about the growing strength of the fund. And these are the talking points that have really had a positive impact on the audiences that who I've been speaking with. At the end of calendar year 2017, our funded status had moved up to approximately 71%, and the market value of the fund stood at just about $350 billion. And despite the recent volatility in the markets, it's grown a little more since then. The fact that the funded status had moved from 64% to 71% over a approximate 12 to 14 month period of time, that was data that most of the stakeholders, most of the members of the system did not know. And if you talk to anyone in our contact center or anyone having direct member conversations, the number one concern our members have is whether their benefit is safe. So this data is helping to support that there is a plan to move forward to full funding. The plan is working, and again, it's that tough decisions have to be made by CalPERS, and we'll work closely with our employer partners to make sure that they can successfully implement some of those decisions. So a couple other points that we're talking about, the positive cash flow. We were scheduled to be continuing negative cash flow, but we are in positive cash flow. That is really a byproduct of additional contributions coming in, and one contribution in particular from the state, the $6 billion that came through the state and the legislature. And I think that's a prime example of what we're working with the employers on right now, on how do we help them find methods and tools to pay down their UAL. If you really think about the system and the root cause of some of the contribution rates not being sustainable or affordable, the UAL is the primary contributor to it. And so we need to continue to find tools and resources that the employers can use to help manage those UAL payments. So we have highlighted 5 achievements that have happened over the last year. We are putting those into our own report. We are putting the finishing touches on that report. I'll get it out to all of you within the next 2 weeks. We'll get it out early to our stakeholders as well, and then we plan on using that for all future speaking engagements and really a focus area over the next 2 months, where Brad and others have me scheduled for a number of visits, important visits. So I know that you'll agree we do still have serious work ahead, but I do think there was some relief in talking with the employers that there wasn't anything currently scheduled that would have an impact on rates, no significant policy decisions. And that, along with the data, I think was good news to the employers and the members who we've been speaking with. And then finally, I'll provide you a brief update on the performance of the Public Employees Retirement Fund as of January 31st of 2018. The total fiscal year to date performance is 10.9. The 1-year return is 17. The 3-year return is 8.6. The 5-year return is 9. The 10-year return is 5.6. And the 20-year return is 6.7. And that does conclude my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Well, you know, in communications or conversations that I have, and I know other board members have with our constituents and with other stakeholders, there is great appreciation for the amount of outreach and communication that's coming out of CalPERS today around these issues that are really material and important to our members. So I appreciate the leadership you've shown around that. Thank you very much. We do have a question from the committee. Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Frost, I just want to say thank you very much for hearing the stakeholders' comments yesterday and agreeing to attach transcripts, making them self-service. Not only will that save time for the stakeholders in making those Public Records Act requests, but it'll also save our staff time, both PR and legal, from trying to fulfill them or try and figure out exactly what they mean. I think it's welcome in the spirit of Sunshine Week and transparency. So thank you very much for hearing them.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to agenda item number 5, which is the action consent items, approval of the February Board of Administration meeting minutes and the board travel approvals. There is a revised 5B in your folders. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Move it.
Motion made by Mr. Jones, seconded by Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. We have had no requests to pull anything off of the consent information items, so that brings us to agenda item number 7, committee reports. First, I'll call on the chair of the investment committee, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. The investment committee met on March the 19th, 2018. The committee approved the following. Agenda item 5A, to recommend for consideration by the Board of Administration that the current investment committee delegation remain in place with no changes, and agenda item 5B, to approve the proposed revisions of real assets program policy, second reading. The committee received reports on the following topics: consultant review of ESG integration, the ESG strategic plan update, an update on the governance and sustainability principles, and the corporate governance update on proxy voting, shareowner campaigns, and corporate engagement. The chair directed staff to do the following: to bring back a review of the gun manufacturers and retailers with options for divestment, scheduled to be taken up in 2019. To bring back a discussion of pros and cons of corporate board diversity, quota percentages versus our principle-based system at a future meeting. To bring back an update in April on staff research on non-voting shares and benchmarks, and the timeline for review, the procedures, and to bring back a proposed revision of governance and sustainability principles for human capital management practices regarding effective policies for sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation in April. The committee heard public comment on support of Wilshire's recommendation and staff work on ESG integration, support of governance and sustainability principles, including geopolitical risk, and fiduciary responsibility of sustainable investments. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the April Investment Committee meeting. Review and propose policy revisions to the supplemental income plan's asset allocation, and the first reading of the revisions to the total fund policy. The next meeting of the Investment Committee is scheduled for April 16, 2018 in Sacramento, California. And that concludes my report, Madam President.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the next agenda item 7B, Pension and Health Benefits Committee report. I'll call on Mr. Fechner, the chair.
Thank you, Madam President. The committee recommends, and I vote, the Pension Health Committee met on March 20th, 2018. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda item 5, approve staff's recommendation to approve the PHBC delegation attached for Board of Administration consideration and approval at the April board meeting.
On motion by committee, any requests to speak? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda item 6, approve staff's recommendation to approve the proposed value-based insurance design for the PERS Select Basic Plan for the 2019 plan year.
On motion by committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The committee received reports on the following topics: the annual retired members' cost of living adjustment, the health beliefs first reading, and the current activities of the 2019 to 23 Health Maintenance Organization Health Plan solicitation. The chair directed staff to investigate enhanced member capabilities to compare health plan benefits, and to provide quarterly updates on PERS Select value-based insurance design beginning March 2019. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the April PHBC meeting. The committee will review the second reading of the health beliefs and hear information on pharmacy reference pricing. The next meeting of the PHBC is scheduled for April 17, 2018 in Sacramento, California. That concludes my report, Madam President.
Thank you. We had no Finance Committee meeting this month. For agenda item 5D, I will call on the chair of that committee, Mr. Slayton.
Thank you, Madam President. The Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee did meet on March 20th. The committee recommends, and I move on agenda item 3B, approve the proposed changes to the executive compensation policy.
Forgive me, on motion by committee.
That's all right.
Sorry, on motion by committee. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. On agenda item 5, review of the Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee delegation, we discussed the proposed changes to that delegation. We did have some an amendment to it, and we're putting that forward for the Board of Administration's consideration and approval at the May 2018 board meeting. On agenda item 6, which was review of the Chief Executive Officer's compensation plan, the committee directed team members to bring back an action item in May 2018 with options for a fixed compensation model, including information on a 457F plan option. The chair directed staff to bring back changes to the executive compensation policy resulting from changes to the committee delegation once they're adopted by the board. Of course, we have the delegation and we have the policy, and they interrelate with each other, so we need to make sure they always stay in sync. Committee heard public comment on the following topic. Neil Johnson, SEIU 1000, took a moment of personal privilege to thank board members for comments at the Investment Committee meeting about developing talent for team members below decision-making levels. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the May Performance Compensation Talent Management Committee meeting, recommendations on fiscal year 2018-19 incentive metrics, and a discussion on pay design and philosophy for positions covered by the executive compensation policy. The next meeting of the Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee Maybe we can get a shorter name for this committee. It's scheduled for May 15th, 2018 in Sacramento, California, and that completes my report.
Thank you very much. Before I turn to the Vice Chair of the Board Governance Committee on Agenda Item 7F, we do have a request to speak on this item, so I'll ask Mr. Behrens to please come forward at this time. Mr. Behrens? 7F. This is 7F? Sorry, we're not doing Risk and Audit Committee. So we're, sorry, forgive me, we didn't have a Risk and Audit Committee meeting this month. So on 7F, please. He wants to speak on the motion.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Tim Behrens, President of the California State Retirees, speaking against the recommended action to make those changes in board governance that would, in my opinion, reduce the ability of all the board members to speak as long as they needed to speak. I think diversity of thought is a very strong part of being a good board, and not having a lively debate because they could be cut off because of time constraints, I think is not the best direction for this board to take. I've been on many boards for the last 50 years, both as chairperson and as board members. And while there were times that I would like to have cut off debate, as the chairperson, I think that the debate needs to go on. I think that it's in the best interest of the stakeholders for the board to all have an opportunity to speak. I would recommend maybe you think about having some time-certain agenda items in the future. If it's a time-certain agenda item and you know it's a hot-button item that a lot of people want to participate, including the stakeholders, then you would already have that time set aside to take extra time and to give people extra time to participate and debate the issue. Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to also thank Marcy and her staff for fixing a issue for one of our stakeholders who had a reduction in his pension by about $1,500 because of a 2-day snafu in his department. And when he got a hold of Marcy and the staff at CalPERS, in a couple of days they fixed the problem. He's now receiving his full pension, as he should. And I want to thank Marcy and her staff personally. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Behrens. Ms. Hollinger.
Thank you. The Board Governance Committee met on March 20th, 2018. The committee elected Priya Mathur as chair and Dana Hollinger as vice chair of the committee. The committee recommends, and I move, the board approve the following. Agenda Item 7, approve the proposed revision to the board governance policy regarding each board member's responsibility for promoting a harassment-free and discrimination-free workplace at CalPERS.
On motion by the committee, any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes.
Agenda Item 8, approve the continuation of the current practice of engaging a court reporter for and ordering transcriptions of all board and committee meetings.
On motion by committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
The chair directed staff to bring back the revisions to the board governance policy, formalizing the 3 procedures to govern meetings of the board and its committees, with amendments to the language regarding the practice to ensure that all board members have a chance to speak before calling on a member who has already spoken, so as to clarify that committee members should all have a chance to speak before other board members present during committee meetings. Review the board governance policy to identify policy sections that don't have a corresponding process in place, and to bring the findings back for discussion. In addition, the chair directed the team to work with her to look into developing a chair training. Review the policies of other state agencies regarding harassment by board members, and to develop a process for investigating harassment allegations against a board member, as well as potential forms of censure. Bring back specific language for the views expressed disclaimer to insert in the board governance policy. add an item to the parking lot for the committee's future consideration of a requirement that a board member obtain board approval before the member speaks to a national or international audience, when it's clear that the board member is invited to speak because of their membership on the CalPERS board. The committee heard public comment on the following topics: revisions to the board governance policy regarding meeting procedures, terminating the current practice of using a court reporter for and ordering transcriptions of all board and committee meetings. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the May Board Governance Committee meeting. An update on Form 700 compliance, the annual review of CEO delegation, and the process for third-party assessment of board performance. Board Governance Policy, Section 11D. The next meeting of the Board Governance Committee is tentatively scheduled for May 15th, 2018 in Sacramento, California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Costigan.
I have a question right before we get to the cases.
You have a question
may have hit
before?
too
Okay,
soon,
so
yes.
we're going to move on to agenda item number 8. You have a question?
Before we take it up, I'd like to separate item 11 out.
Okay.
I'm
Item
sorry,
11.
I may have hit my microphone too soon. Before we take up the decisions before us, please call on me. I'm sorry.
There's 8A through L.
I'm sorry. It's item on my agenda right here. My apologies. It's 11. It's agenda item 8K, Catherine Campos. She came before the State Personnel Board, so I'd like to separate that item out. We upheld her termination, so
Okay.
I'm not going to vote on this item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Costigan. 8K. 8K. Mr. Gillihan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to, before we get to, I'd like to make a motion that we remand case 8A for additional evidence.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
The motion was seconded by, was that Mr. Seha or Mr. Costigan? Made by Mr. Gillihan, seconded by Mr. Costigan. So on that motion, that we remand 8A for the taking of additional evidence, is there a specific, sorry, Mr. Gillihan, did you want to specify what type of evidence?
Yeah, if you read Mr. Shaw's summary, it appears that the person's IME wasn't able to provide testimony at the hearing, and it's not clear in the decision why that is, and wasn't, for whatever reason, able to return for a second day. So I just feel like they didn't get a fair hearing, and that's also sort of implied in Mr. Shaw's lukewarm endorsement of the decision.
So for the taking of additional medical evidence?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion is before you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Now I'll call on Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the board adopt the proposed decisions at agenda items 8B through 8H and 8J and 8L as the board's own decision with the minor modifications argued by staff to agenda items 8F and 8J.
Is there a second to the motion? Motion was seconded by Ms. Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
I move that the board remand agenda item 8I for the taking of additional evidence as argued by staff.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
I move that the board adopt the proposed decision of agenda item 8K as the board's own decision.
Mr. Costigan, did you want to? You're just not going to vote on it? Okay. Any discussion? Oh, is there a second to the motion? Second. Seconded by Ms. Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes, and please note that Mr. Costigan did not vote on that item. That brings us to agenda item number 9. Mr. Jacobs.
Good morning, Chair Mather and board members. This item pertains to the selection process for the board's independent counsel for Office of Administrative Matters for the next 5 years. As stated in the agenda item, the current provider of that service, Mr. Shaw, that contract expires on May 31. The board's policy is to not have contracts go beyond 5 years without special approval. So in November, at the board president's direction, the legal office issued the solicitation for this position for the next 5 years. And we received 4 proposals, 2 of which we collectively deemed viable. And by collectively, I mean we spoke with the board president, Ms. Mather. And so the proposal before you is to create an ad hoc committee to interview the 2 viable candidates, review their written materials, and then make a selection. And the idea here is basically to save board time, to streamline what is rather a clunky process of having people come before the full board and do these interviews when they're faced with 13 folks to respond to. So basically to avoid that awkward interview process and to streamline the process so that we could move along and to have a new contract in place when this one expires at the end of May.
Thank you. This is an action item. It's the pleasure of the committee. Moved by Mr. Gillihan, seconded by Ms. Hollinger. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those, oh, sorry, Mr. Costigan, one moment.
I'm sorry, I don't have the materials. What I see is the general counsel's is an information consent item. What?
It's agenda item number 9.
9, okay, I just want to, a little behind on this one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. On motion, there's a motion before you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Sorry, was that a no? Yes. Please note Ms. Brown's no. That brings us to agenda item number 10. Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. That brings us to agenda item number 10, state and federal legislation update. Ms. Ashley.
Good morning, Madam President and members of the board. Mary Ann Ashley, CalPERS team member. The state and federal legislative update is an informational item, and the legislative summary is available in your board materials for your reference. As anticipated, there were many, many bills that were introduced by the February 16th bill introduction deadline. And the updated legislative summary notes those bills that we are currently monitoring and working with CalPERS program areas to identify the full potential impact to CalPERS and its members. And I'd like to highlight just a few of those bills. AB 1912 by Assemblymember Rodriguez relating to joint power agreements and liability. This bill was recently amended, and it would, among other things, eliminate the ability of JPAs to specify in their joint powers agreement that the debts, liabilities, and obligations of the JPA shall not be those of its member agencies. It would make all current and former JPA member agencies jointly and severally liable for its debts to a public retirement system. It would prohibit CalPERS from contracting with a JPA whose member agencies do not accept joint and several liability. It would remove the authority of the board to not reduce member benefits as their employers' assets and liabilities are moved into the terminated agency pool. And it would require CalPERS to file civil action against termination JPA member agencies to compel payment of its obligations, and it would allow CalPERS to recover attorney fees. AB 2571 by Assemblymember Gonzalez Fletcher would prohibit a public investment fund from making new, additional, or renewed investments in an alternative investment vehicle if it is managed by an investment manager that has not adopted and committed to comply with a race and gender pay equity policy. We've met with the sponsors of the measure, and we plan on engaging with the member along with CalSTRS to provide education and discuss potential amendments to the bill. SB 1022 is our own sponsored terminating agency process bill. The bill will most likely be heard in the Senate PERS committee at the beginning of April, and we are currently working with the members, consultants, and some stakeholders on potential amendments to the bill to address some stakeholder concerns. As I mentioned in my last update, Senator Morlock did introduce 3 pension-related bills, SB 1031, 1032, and 1033. We are currently watching these bills closely, as well as working with our program areas to identify the full impact to CalPERS. All 3 bills have been referred to the Senate PERS committee, however, they have not yet been set for hearing. SB 1149 by Senator Glazer would, among other things, allow specified new state employees the option to participate in a defined contribution plan in lieu of mandatory membership in CalPERS defined benefit plan. CalPERS is working on identifying the cost of this bill and the total impact, and we are also engaging with our stakeholder groups and the author's office. And this bill is set to be heard in the Senate PERS committee on April 9th. SB 1413 by Senator Nielsen. It was introduced on February 16th, and it's currently in a spot bill format. However, we anticipate the bill will potentially be amended to authorize CalPERS to establish a separate Section 115 trust through which eligible California public agency employers would be able to pre-fund their future annual contributions. We're currently working with stakeholders on the concept and providing technical assistance on the language. And then SB 964, it's not noted on the legislative summary as it was just amended March 14th. But this is actually a reintroduction of last year's SB 560 relating to climate-related financial risk reporting. CalSTRS and CalPERS team members have been engaging and meeting with the member's office and working on amendments that will achieve the goal of the author and also be consistent with CalPERS investment beliefs and principles. The legislature goes on spring recess beginning tomorrow at the end of session and will reconvene April 2nd. So our sponsored bills and other bills that we are closely monitoring will be set for hearing in April when the legislature reconvenes from break. On the federal side, a lot is taking place as well. A considerable amount of discussion surrounds the omnibus bill. Congress has until March 23rd to strike a deal on a federal spending plan that would fund the government through the end of September. We will closely monitor any developments from this bill that could potentially impact CalPERS and our members. There has also been several regulatory bills that have moved through the Senate that are of interest to CalPERS. On March 14th, the Senate passed S 2155, which is the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act. This bill would make several changes to the Dodd-Frank Act and other financial regulations. In December 2017, CalPERS sent a letter to Chairman Mike Crapo and Ranking Member Sherrod Brown, urging inclusion of 3 House bills in S 2155 that had passed the House Financial Services Committee or the full House on a bipartisan basis. Additionally, CalPERS also opposed several measures which have thus far been excluded from this bill, S 2155, including H.R. 4015, which is the Corporate Governance Reform and Transparency Act that would be dealing with proxy advisory firms. In February, CalPERS team members, along with K&L Gates, made visits to key congressional members, reminding them of our support and inclusion of the House provisions in S 2155 and also our opposition to H.R. 4015. As it now stands, the measures that CalPERS has supported are included in S 2155, and the measures that CalPERS has opposed have been excluded. For the next steps, it's possible that the Senate may simply pass the Senate bill, or excuse me, the House may simply pass the Senate bill, or a House-Senate conference committee could be convened to reconcile the differences between the House and Senate versions. We will continue to monitor any further developments on this and keep the board updated. Within the healthcare arena, on March 15th, 4 congressional representatives, including California Congressman Omni Berra, launched the Bipartisan Healthcare Innovation Caucus, which will work to advance a legislative agenda that encourages innovative policy ideas to improve quality of care and lower costs for consumers. And then lastly, CalPERS is closely monitoring S2526, which is the Retirement Enhancement and Savings Act of 2018, or otherwise known as RESA, which is aimed at solving the multi-employer pension crisis and increasing voluntary retirement savings by giving employers incentives to make it easier for their employees to save. We don't believe that this bill has a direct impact to CalPERS. However, as I mentioned, we will continue watching this bill as it moves. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We do have a few questions from the board. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Ms. Ashley, I just want to thank you and the team for moving aggressively on the JPA legislation because, as we know, the sponsoring agencies on previous JPAs that they were not liable for the financial requirements of those JPAs, and so we certainly need this protection so that that they will remain solvent, so that it doesn't put at risk our members not being able to receive their pensions for the rest of their lives. So thank you for moving on that right away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Ms. Taylor.
Yes, thank you. I also want to thank you and your staff for the work you guys do, because there's so much legislation. It's just amazing you can get through it. But what I wanted to also ask you was on the optional membership for new state employees bill, the 1149 Glazer bill, you stated you're monitoring that. Mm-hmm. And you also stated that you were doing some research in terms of what that would cost. Is that an analysis of what that would mean to the pension fund cost?
Yes. So we're compiling an analysis of the full impact to CalPERS.
Okay, because it's my understanding that as we pull employees out into another fund, essentially what you're doing is weakening the pension fund. So I would assume that after the analysis, and I don't know how fast this is moving, but that we would be opposed to this legislation. Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further requests to speak, so thank you very much, Ms. Ashley. That brings us to agenda item number 11, Enterprise Performance Reporting, second quarter report. Are you leading?
Hi, yes.
Hi,
good morning, Madam President and members of the board. Sabrina Hutchins, CalPERS team member. Today I'm joined by several of our executive and senior leaders to provide you with the second quarter review of our Enterprise Performance Report. Many of you will recall from our July 2017 offsite, we had a comprehensive review around all of the components within this reporting framework, which included our strategic measures, our business plan initiatives, and our key performance indicators. We then also followed up with our first quarter report in November of last year. What we want to share with you today is focused on those indicators in this quarter that are either at risk or off target. And those components this time around are specifically related to a few business plan initiatives. So a little background before we jump in. The framework that this system works within aligns back to our foundation, which captures our mission, our vision, and our values. And in the simplest terms, represents who we are and what we want to achieve. This includes our strategic plan goals and objectives, and our outcome measures, which highlight our high-level operational expectations. Depicted on this slide is a high-level visual of our enterprise performance management system, which involves the development, implementation, monitoring and reporting, and ad hoc refinements of these metrics that support our mission. The intent of this system is to reinforce CalPERS' desire to be transparent and accountable in support of our goals, objectives, and operational expectations. The focus of our discussion here today and plans for future reporting will be focused on the strategic side of the house, which again encompasses our strategic measures and our business plan initiatives. And as this system incorporates a significant amount of information and data, you do have the full details within your agenda item package, which includes our operational reports, and the team is prepared to take questions as they come up. Our strategic plan alignment map shows you the connection between our goals, objectives, measures, and initiatives. This is attachment A within your package, and you also received a hard copy today to correct an omission. This map reflects the overlay of our status indicators that are red, yellow, and green. Additional details for each of these indicators can be found within your attachments. As this is an iterative process, I do want to clarify the other indicators you see in this view, which first is pending refresh, which means a baseline is established and a metric is awaiting completion of a data refresh cycle. If data is not available, then your detailed summary sheet will tell you when it will be available. And lastly, if under development is noted, then efforts are currently underway to solidify our methodology. Our review and analysis of second quarter information identified that 3 of our 37 strategic measures refreshed with updated data to provide new status indicators, and all of those are reflecting green, which is on target. Of the 37 business plan initiatives, we have 3 that are either at risk or off target, and we'll discuss those in more details with you in just a few moments. You will also have an update related to our Information Security Office indicators within closed session today. So as members of our executive team speak to the initiatives, they will be providing information regarding root causes for these indicators, as well as potential constraints and mitigation strategies currently underway. Please keep in mind that this report is a reflection of status as of December 31st. However, this is a good example of how we plan to report on topics that are relevant and in the forefront of our strategic priorities. You can also find a summary of our criteria that identifies how we determine our status indicators and hold ourselves accountable, specifically related to business plan initiatives, and that's page 1 of attachment D. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brad to discuss our first initiative that's related to our reduced complexity goal.
Thank you, Sabrina. Good morning, Madam President and board members. Brad Pacheco, CalPERS team. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on our digital communication strategy business plan initiative and provide some context as to why we have labeled it at risk. I'd like to take a moment and step back and remind the board and our stakeholders about the focus of this initiative. For us, internally, this is about 3 R's. It's about reach, response, and reputation. And we're working on new and innovative ways to increase our reach, response, and reputation by leveraging technology, data, and digital trends. What we know is by enhancing our digital delivery, we are going to exponentially be smarter about what our members and employers want and need. We'll have the ability to deliver faster and more timely communications, and we'll know how our members and employers access the information, when they read it, and how they were directed to the content. When we initially outlined this business plan initiative and strategy, we were ambitious, but we believed that our objectives were achievable within the deadlines that we had set. Among our goals was to research and propose a customer service management system that we had anticipated we could have in place by the end of this fiscal year. What we learned in our research is that implementing a true system of this kind is a journey of miles rather than just steps. And there's also a cost associated with having such a system. So we're concentrating our focus on transforming our current communication practices in preparation for an integrated system in the future. and we're on track to achieve 2 deliverables and significant improvements. We've developed a communication dashboard that you will all soon be seeing that will be used to provide our leadership and you enhanced communication reports about our reach, response, and reputation. We're also on track to pilot 3 products digitally, including our flagship newsletter Perspective that is sent to all members. If you attended our benefit education event in Sacramento, you might have seen our team conducting member interviews on the product that we developed for them, and I believe Mr. Fechner participated in that as well. Our plan is to launch these products in 2019 once we gather some more stakeholder input. You know, our ultimate goal in our work is to provide all of our members and stakeholders with rich, interactive content and deliver it in a way that they want to receive it. And that does include not only digital, but print as needed. So just in closing, while we have made some incremental changes to our strategy based on what our research is telling us, we haven't lost sight of our overall goal to improve communication. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I have no requests from the board. Thanks very much, Mr. Pacheco.
Good morning, Madam President, board members. Forrest Grimes, CalPERS team. I'm reporting on the Enterprise Data Management Initiative intended to strengthen how data is shared internally to make sure CalPERS team members are speaking the same language regarding data and to ensure that information we provide to our external stakeholders is accurate and consistent. This initiative is presently at risk for the following reason. Some of the key team members shifted focus to completion of the CAFR during this reporting period, putting us behind schedule on some key deliverables, including establishing an oversight committee and creating a charter. We do have some wins to report, however. In compiling
Mr. Grimes,
a
I'm
data
sorry to interrupt you.
dictionary.
Could you just move your mic a little bit closer
Certainly,
to you?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
We do have some wins, which include establishing data stewards throughout the enterprise and also establishing a data dictionary of CalPERS terms. Our next steps to get back on track include establishing the steering committee position within our Senior Leadership Council governance umbrella, and further refining of data management roles and responsibilities throughout the enterprise. With that, I will see if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Seeing none, we can proceed. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Madam President, board members. Doug Hoffner, team member. Today we're reporting an item in red, so related to talent management. About a year ago, working with Ms. Frost, we developed and revised the leadership competency measures within the organization. 7 measures were developed for 4 levels of management and leadership within CalPERS. This initiative is really about taking that next step and providing and developing those core competencies for all of the team members throughout the organization. We're looking to bucket that into about 4 different areas, not by classification necessarily, but sort of by the work related to what they do at CalPERS. We had an ambitious goal to have that work completed essentially by December. We missed that target. We are working collaboratively with Mr. Gillihan's CalHR and the teams related to civil service improvement, related to competencies. There's a lot of work the state's been doing with higher education and others, particularly at the community college level, to ensure that the workforce of the future has these competencies from an educational background as well. So we're looking to build that into the work that we're doing. And effectively now we're crosswalking those competencies from our leadership competencies that were developed to all the team members. And we're confident to be developed by April and then in place by the June target deadline.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? I have just one question, and it might not be directly correlated to core competencies,
Sure.
But and I sort of asked this question a little bit on Monday also, but when there are opportunities for a team member to exhibit leadership, how do we have a process in place internally for how those leadership opportunities are, people can compete to lead them? Just, how are people selected to sort of develop, because leadership opportunities are an opportunity to develop more skills and to exhibit competencies? Anyway.
I guess 2 points on that. So we have instituted a pilot right now. We'll have the conclusion of that in April for emerging leaders. And so effectively we took, and I don't remember the number, I think it was 24 individuals competitively selected through the organization to put them in a role of what leadership would look like in that first level. We had, I think, 45 individuals that applied for that process. Before we move forward, we want to make sure the pilot was effective. We'll know the outcomes of that in a month or so. But I think that's going to give people a real taste of what that work looks like. And that's just an initial step. We also developed a system called the Luminet. You may be familiar with this from about 2 years ago, which gives people the opportunity, the team members, to basically provide sort of a LinkedIn feel, a system internally for the skill sets that they have. And so while they were hired for a specific job with a specific duty statement, what we found, and the team members have told us, is they're clearly much broader than that, right? The skill sets and the other attributes and credentials and higher education degrees they may have may fully retain to that job that they have today. How could they then express that to us? And it's really opened up and developed into a mentor-mentee relationship where they can go on beyond just the people they work with on a day-to-day basis, but to put those skill sets out there for the rest of the organization should other projects come along that we need those resources for. And that gives us an opportunity to engage with their management, to understand what their workload is like, but it also broadens the ability to learn from others across the organization. So not a mandate by any means, but definitely an opportunity for them to engage with us in a way that's really about the fuller person, the talents they bring to this organization beyond the job that they were hired for originally.
I really appreciate the efforts that you and the organization are making in this regard. I think it is essential that people get these leadership opportunities, not just because they know somebody or they already have a relationship or are already comfortable with somebody, but because they have had an opportunity, each person has had, who's interested has had an opportunity to sort of express what their talents are.
And maybe I'll give you one more example, and this goes back several years, but sort of the idea factory we use internally to look at leaning the organization and getting feedback and input from the employees and the team members. That initial discussion that occurred a couple of years ago was born out of feedback from several different teams. And so as they identified an opportunity to make change, they also raised their hand to participate. And so we used a broad spectrum of team members across the organization, irrespective of their level or duty statement within the organization, to participate. And there was, I think, 3 or 4 specific team groups that were developed in response to the feedback we heard from them from a survey, and that has spun off into this kind of idea where we're continuing to engage and get information from our team members about improvements and opportunities to make CalPERS a better place.
Terrific, thank you. Let me call on Mr. Miller.
Hi, thank you. I just want to say I really appreciate seeing kind of these glimmers of movement and enlightenment to approaches that are not the same old state government workforce planning and strategic planning approaches that we've had here since well before Governor Wilson's tenure, and to moving to something that's more of an actual strategic workforce planning model that's really looking at what are we trying to do and accomplish, what do we need in terms of those activities that we need to perform and what we need to accomplish, rather than these kind of Vietnam War era models of classifications and position-based planning that really tends to perpetuate the same kind of organizational bureaucracy and not create the organization of the future. And so having been very much engaged with these topics for 30 plus years, I really want to commend CalPERS and also the potential for that collaboration with CalHR and with Secretary Batcher's folks and everything is really encouraging to see some movement toward a more enlightened and effective approach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. That concludes the questions from the committee. Do you have anything else, Ms. Hutchins?
Oh, and nope, just next steps. We plan to see you in July as far as an agenda item to report on third quarter updates and highlight some of our overall organizational successes.
Terrific. Thank you very much. That brings us to agenda item number 12, summary of board direction. Ms. Frost?
I recorded one, and that was related to item 8A for the taking of additional medical evidence, and that was it.
Okay, terrific. I didn't catch anything either. That brings us to agenda item number 13, public comment. We do have two members of the public who wish to speak, Samuel Villalobos and Chris Constantine. If you could please come forward, take a seat here to my left. The mic is on for you. If you could identify yourself and your affiliation for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And just a reminder that you cannot speak about any item that is before the ALJ or the board at this time. You may sit. There are 2 seats here.
How are you?
Again, just a reminder that you may not speak about any item that is before the board or the ALJ at this time. Mr. Villalobos.
Going with the theme that you have discussed earlier, appreciation of women in the workforce, especially here at CalPERS, I want to publicly thank my wife, Olivia Villalobos, and my daughter, my sister, and my entire family who have unconditionally supported me in expressing my support for the proposed decision on agenda item A1.
I'm sorry,
I am not here to discuss the argument of agenda item A1, just to qualify it. What I am here to discuss is the proposed, the procedural summary.
I'm sorry, I don't believe you can speak to any portion of 8I.
Well, if that be the case, then I hope that you allow me to distribute to the board members.
Sir, I cannot, I'm afraid. We've remanded this back to the ALJ for the taking of additional evidence.
Then I simply want to go on public record that I am going to be asking the board to reconsider agenda item.
I'm sorry, sir, we cannot hear anything with respect to agenda item 8I.
Okay, limited to the 3 minutes, and I'm going to keep in that vein. I'm simply going to attempt one more time to ask you to reconsider that item.
Sorry, sir, you cannot testify at this time with respect
Once
to agenda
again,
item 8I.
then I will hold.
We'll have to turn the mic
staff.
off now at this time. I'm sorry, sir. We cannot take any testimony with respect to 8I. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Constantine.
Good morning. My name is Mr. Chris Constantine. I'm the Assistant City Manager and City Auditor for the City of Chico, California, a CalPERS member. Prior to that, I served as the CFO, HR Director, and IT Director for the city. I also served as the Assistant City Auditor for the City of San Diego and an Audit Manager for the City of San Jose, and for 13 years as an elected board member with the West Valley Mission Community College District, another CalPERS member. The reason I come here before you is to give you a debt of gratitude. I attended the investment committee yesterday, 2 days, was it 2 days ago?
2 days
Yesterday.
ago. 2 days ago. Monday.
I was here all day during the investment committee meeting. It was a very long and productive meeting. But the item that I took note of, because our employees are very interested in the retirement decisions that CalPERS has the authority and power to make over, was the issue of whether or not to divest from investments that involve firearms. While it was a very emotional and tough meeting for you as board members, given the number of victims and family of those victims that came before you, I applaud you for sticking to the most important aspect of what your job was, and that is the ultimate viability and sustainability of the plan. I also want to give an appreciation to your CEO, Marcy Frost, who has welcomed us on one-on-one meetings with her in terms of understanding what we can do as an agency to help CalPERS achieve the goal of fiscal sustainability. We will continue to be your partner, and we will continue to support you in your efforts to ensure that that plan is sustainable forever. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much for your comments. That brings us to agenda item number 14. This morning, we have two substantive, before I move to agenda item 14, is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak at this time? Okay, thank you. This morning, we have 2 substantive items in closed session, an update on litigation matters and a cybersecurity update involving staff's work to protect the system. Unlike the closed session item for litigation matters, in order to hold a closed session to consider matters posing a potential threat of criminal activity against CalPERS property or equipment, including electronic data, and where disclosure could compromise CalPERS security, the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act requires at least 2/3 of the board to affirmatively vote in order to utilize this exception. Based on consultation with our legal office, discussion concerning CalPERS information and cybersecurity qualifies for this closed session exception. After the closed session, the board will briefly report out in open session that we met under this exception and if any action was taken. What's the pleasure of the board? I am looking for a motion to meet in closed session for the cybersecurity briefing and a second. Moved by Ms. Taylor and seconded by Ms. Hollinger. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. We are going to, at this time, recess, thank you, the open session of the board meeting and convene into closed session in 10 minutes.